Thank you for coming today. I'm Phil Tran with Inland Sales Group. We're the Chicago Faucet rep in Illinois. And today, to get started on this, I want to talk about a little bit about Chicago Faucets. Where we were started in 1901. We were started on the near west side of Chicago. Our headquarters is in Des Plaines. All of our brass is poured up in Milwaukee. Our plastics and other components are made in Elyria, Ohio. Our main shipping point in assembly is in Michigan City, Indiana, and our electronics for our electronic faucets are designed in Huntsville, Alabama. So very American made. Our parent company is Gaboret, so we are very fortunate to have them as a partner. I'd like to get started on our quintessential piece of any faucet is the cartridge. Some people might call it a stem. And this is what really started Chicago Faucets with Albert Brown creating the quatern cartridge, which actually works with the flow of the water when you're opening and closing to make it easier to open and close. The big thing about our ceramic cartridges and is the repairable nature of them. So you can have this cartridge, even if it's in one of your 100-year-old faucets, and we can still rebuild it today using our 1277 DAB. The components are going to be a little different. Our old cartridge had cork, but we can still replace it with our rubber washers now. And I'm going to show you quickly how to disassemble one of them. So when we're taking it out of our faucet, what we're going to do, you're going to be taking, oh, there we go, this one. So you're going to be taking that bottom nut, and we want to loosen it off the back. And our main metal parts we're not too worried about, but as we're taking it apart, we have our seat washer. We have an O-ring, and as I'm taking it apart, this is going to unscrew from the body, and we have a couple more O-rings. And as you can see in our 1277 kit, we have all your components to repair. So I would be taking off the old O-ring and replacing it, and then you would just rebuild it as you go, threading this back on. Now you have your O-ring. You would take a new, this is your biggest one. It can get damaged when you have rusty iron, galvanized steel lines. Rust breaks apart and you're compressing. The way this works is the compression, and it can be, the rust can get compressed in with hard water. And then finally you would be placing this nut back on and throwing it on, oops, without dropping, of course. But then you would thread it back on, thank you. Of course, always into the toilet. And then our other cartridge, which we've, as we got more modern, we want an easily replaceable cartridge. So that's why that's why we today have a ceramic disc. The thing about the ceramic disc is they're easy to interchange, and we have a nice color code, red, hot, blue, cold. Yes. Yes, this would be for the handles. So this is where your handles is what uses the cartridges. And when these break, a ceramic disc is done. So then you would just be replacing these. So the big difference between our quatern compression is repairable, and then these are, you're going to be replacing them.
The whole valve or ceramic?
Sorry?
The whole valve or ceramic?
The whole cartridge. Yeah.
By the way, is this for kind of like Chicago faucets particularly, or sort of faucets generally?
Any company with a ceramic cartridge, you're going to be replacing. And then, so I'm going to go into talking about the installation of a faucet. Normally, it's changed throughout the years. We used to have a lot more metal in a lot of our faucets. Now some still have it, some don't. So normally you'd be using a basin wrench beneath the counter. And so with the installation of this faucet, this is our 786, you have your body. I'm going to be lowering my nuts all the way down to make it easy. And I have my 8-inch center. as you come up through, this is going to help me hold the faucet in place. So this comes up and down, and now it's holding my faucet. Now that's not my true height, but it's going to make it easier for me. Now I can come around as I'm placing my different components. That's for my escutcheons to hold on to. And then if I was just to place this right now, which I've seen on some installations, if I was to put this together right now without tightening everything up, again, you're going to be wobbly. So as I go through, I'm going to want to tighten my nuts at the bottom.
So do you have to take that entire thing off just to change the...
No, I'm just showing you actual initial installation. So I'll show you where to change the cartridges. I'll show you how to change that in a moment. No, this is installation portion. Yeah. So. So when you're behind, you would. It depends. With more metal, it was a little difficult. With the plastic, you'd be up and behind, and you'd be reaching, and yes, you'd be twisting. Then you'd switch to your basin wrench, and that would allow you. The basin wrench is going to allow you to get up higher and lock on to your nuts.
And again, this is all dependent on availability of funds, because some bathtubs you can't get.
Correct. Yeah, that'll be, well, with the bathtub, you're going to hopefully have an access panel in the back of your bathtub. This is a kitchen faucet. This is a 780. This is our 786. I can grab it from the collector bond, and we can get a basin wrench. So as I place this, these are what is really going to be holding my faucets up, and they're going to be sliding on. Whoop. Thank you. So that's going to be sliding on there. And as I go, so now I have now these are locked into place, so I don't have to worry about my handles sinking in when you're manipulating them. And now as I'm putting it together, my escutcheons will be covering all the lovely brass. Thank you. So this is your basin wrench that would be coming. This can bend, whether you're loosening or tightening the wrench, and this would be going up behind your faucet to help loosen the nut. So there's teeth on here, and it opens, just depending. Sometimes if you can get an adjustable wrench, I've seen people with, if you're just taking the faucet out, nowadays they're melting that plastic nut to get it off, and when they're replacing a faucet. If you're repairing, I don't recommend melting the nut. So now I need to hold the escutcheon down. So I've got my nut right here. This again, I would be using a crescent wrench for. Or an adjustable wrench. I do not want teeth on here because this is all chrome plated, and chrome plating, of course, can be chipped off as you're tightening down. You do not want to have a bunch of teeth on the actual chrome portion. Brass, I'm not as worried about, but even then, if you can use a crescent wrench or an adjustable wrench, I would recommend to do so. So now the escutcheons are held down fairly well, and then I would be installing my handles with different manufacturers, and depending on your installation, you're going to want ADA, well, some people call them ADA wing handles. These are 4-inch handles. You can install them. You can install our this is our 369 handle, which is your standard lever handle. And finally, we also, we have many more, but you also have a cross handle. Yes, sir.
When you put the structures on and the centerpiece, do you put underputty, anything under there to prevent water from going in there?
You can. I don't, because as we've gotten further along with the rubber holding it down, I'm not as worried about. There's an O-ring seal on the bottom of this. And so on the bottom of here, I can show you after when I'm taking it apart. There's an O-ring on the bottom holding it.
And how do you connect it to the pipes, the water pipes?
I can show you. So in Chicago, you can either use a flexible connector that is stainless steel braid, or you have to hard pipe, or you would use hard tubing. You cannot use a rubber flexible connector that's not stainless steel lined by code in Chicago. Sorry?
I assume you can't purchase them anyways if they're not good.
Depending, because they can be used for other things. So they're still there, and people, just depending on the installer, can use them. But so in Chicago, stainless steel braid or hard piping. And then for that, in the installation portion, you would be connecting to the angle stops beneath your countertop. Angle stops? Do you want to? The water shutoffs. Normally, they're about 3 inches long, and you'd either have a with key or without, and you'd be tightening them so you can work on your faucet without having to shut the whole building off. And yeah, we'll bring one up to let you see. And so another thing with Chicago, what we offer is, so now you've got this one base, but you might have liked a small gooseneck. So I can mount my smaller GN2A, but if, let's say this is too short for your faucet, I can now move on to a 10-inch spout. So as people have gotten more, we've noticed that industrial or commercial is in on some residential installations. We've seen people using even commercial faucets in their homes. Another is a double jointed spout. This spout is common in food service industry. People also, pot fillers on their stoves will normally have a valve at the back end of this to be able to shut it off. And all of these can be installed they all thread onto our same thread pattern. So now talking about the cartridge change out. So if I was going to change, I'll quickly get into. So here, an example of the angle stops. So they can, we also have, there's things called straight stops, but these, so it comes out of the wall, you can have 1/2-inch IPS, 3/8, it depends on, or compression onto copper, and many other connections nowadays. You'd be coming out of the wall, and then this portion is where, this is a 1/2-inch, that's where 3/8, and that would be connecting, I wouldn't use the nut on there, I'd be using this, and I'd be connecting directly onto that. So now I can have this all shut off.
Where does that go?
This end, well, this is for my electronic faucet, but if it had it would have a 1/2-inch, and if you can see right here, so behind the faucet, I'd take this nut off. If I was hard piping, I'd use this to compress on, and this is 1/2-inch IPS thread. Just connect to that, yeah. And depending on the connection, you'd be either using pipe dope, Teflon tape, or if it's a compression, you'd be compressing onto the pipe, and you wouldn't have to worry about pipe tape or dope. So when I am changing out the cartridge, instead of having to take my whole faucet apart, I would shut off the water supply with those angle stops, but I'm going to take off this port and the compression nut. Now I have one more piece holding down my cartridge. So as I take my now, Sometimes it can be a little more difficult. Of course, I haven't had water running through this for 20 years, but let's say my cartridge is finally knocked out on me, and I can take, this was a compression cartridge, my ceramic cartridge in here. Now, my ceramic cartridge is done, but I can throw in my regular compression cartridge, and it fits in that same exact port. So depending on what I'd like. Now, as I'm looking at it right now, this would be my cold side, so I'd want to make sure on the right side of the faucet is your cold, left hot. I'd want to make sure that I'm putting my cold cartridge in. So our part number would be an 099. Our hot is a 1-100. I think of it as 100 is hotter than 99, hot and cold. We also, of course, like I said earlier, we have blue for cold. Now,
You turn the water line off.
on my those angle stops we talked about, as long as my angle stops are holding, I can turn these off, and so I don't have water coming to the faucet. Correct. And now, if this was per se in a bathroom with a different mount, and this is in a public situation, I can also, with the same body from those two, change this into a metering faucet. So all I need is my actuator, my actual metering, and then I'll be changing to a different escutcheon because I no longer want this bell. So, well, actually, it's for the net. So, tighten down. And then I need a screen because I want to protect this actuator from any rust, sediment. So I'll put the screen on here, drop that in. And now this, in my other portion, I need my washer. This is going to create my seal. I do not need any pipe tape or dope on this connection. It's a mechanical thread for us. So as I tighten down, I would, and then I would tighten down some more. And then when I install this, now when I press down, it would be giving me a metered water. Let's say this is a school and some of the children might be leaving that old lever handle on and just walking away. Now it only gives them the number of seconds I've allotted them. So I can adjust this with our metering faucets. These can all be adjusted. So by this right here is our adjustment. The higher it is, the shorter the time is. The way that works is I'm giving my button less room to go down. So if I've tightened this all the way down, our spec says a maximum of 15 seconds. Based on water pressure and one of the CPS schools, I've gotten this to 20 seconds with a metering. Let's say you have had one of these and it's new installation and it keeps running. That is because there's not enough air in that actuator, that first piece I put in, or the actual metering assembly, and I will take this about 10 times, and that's just getting all the air out of there and allowing the meter to run properly. And so now I'm done with that, and it should be, if it didn't work, I'll wrap it again for another about 10 times. So with these faucets, there's a lot of a lot of things you can change into. And I'm going to show you another faucet that, so when you are, again, this wouldn't be as easy when you're taking apart a 20-year-old faucet, but you would normally need some sort of, on the bottom, you would need some sort of either channel lock and or basin wrench, which is that wrench I showed earlier, to be taking this off.
Why can't you just use a regular wrench?
So normally this would be, and you can, regular wrench like a channel lock would be, some people might call a regular wrench with the teeth. And so I wouldn't use that on my chrome plated, but on the bottom, the channel lock or the adjustable wrenches would be fine. Just depends on how much room you have back here. Sorry? That base wrench on the bottom, yes. On the bottom side, because it has that arm on there to allow me to get up here and actually loosen my my connections on the bottom. For the cartridge? Yes. Oh, on the for the cartridge, pulling that out? You could either use that, or for at least mine, normally I can get it out with grab it onto the cartridge with a pair of channel locks, and you're going to normally have to give it a yank. Luckily, we have those O-rings, which won't corrode and make it a little easier, but we've all run into faucets where you've got no other choice but to, cut it, not to mention other manufacturers. And so let's say I've now gone to, especially today with people trying to be more industrial. So we have our 540. This, as it comes in the box, this is traditionally a back-mounted faucet. So you'd be mounting it, and you'd have maybe a food service with a pre-rinse sprayer or on a stainless steel sink. However, with some modifications, I can take this faucet and turn it into a deck-mounted for your kitchen faucet at home. So these are my SSJK arms. This is for deck mounting. These are to allow me to get to those water lines below, like we talked about before. So this is, again, a 1/2 inch IPS thread. And there's a gasket. This one is where you might be putting some plumber's putty beneath to make that connection a little tighter and for that water. And as I'm running this down, we're going to have, beneath the deck, we're going to have a washer and a nut to keep them tight. So this one would be hung up, and you'd be running first, most likely with, as far as you can upon installation, first installation. You'd be running up, that washer's wide enough, wider than the hole that you've cut into your deck. Your kitchen sink or bathroom. And then you're going to be finishing tightening up. Of course, I'm doing this all hand tight, where you're going to be finishing tightening up with another wrench. So these are all more prone for kitchen faucets. So now I've taken that rear mount, and of course with those 90-degree angles in the back, it's now mounted. And just like that prior one, I can now take any of those spouts that fit on that faucet prior. You can now have a double jointed spout for filling pots and or your gooseneck spouts. And those handles can also be modified as well. Any of those cartridges that fit in my 786 body can also fit in here. But as you can see, I don't have any escutcheons like the other one, because this is above deck, where this one was below deck. So I have my bonnet right here, and then my cartridge being held in. For these installations, you do not normally need tempering valves because you're in you're in a kitchen and normally private. And so from here is where I move into more of the bathroom faucets. Some big things, especially in public restrooms, is the use of 1070 mixing valves. ASSC 1070 is a standard put out there to protect public when washing hands. So you're going to normally have your kitchen faucet with a mixing valve underneath. And this is a faucet, actually, it's our 420T, which has an ASSC 1070 mixer in the cartridge. So you can install this run your two water supplies to the faucet, and your installation's over. One thing when repairing a faucet, whether it's our faucet or anyone else's, a nice trick is you always see that red button when you're in a bathroom at, let's say, the CTA. Normally that button's been damaged because when they replace a cartridge, they had to use something sharp to pry that out. And so it just diminishes the look of the faucet. This collar, when I pop it up, actually prompts that to come out. And then when I am looking to change my cartridge, I take it's an Allen set, which comes with the faucet. And you're going to want to loosen that. As that comes off, you'll then pull this. Here's the nut that's actually holding that in place. And now you've got to your cartridge. As you can see, this cartridge looks slightly different than your kitchen faucet. This is a little different than most cartridges because in here is that 1070 mixing valve with in here are two checks. The biggest thing, especially in homeowners, households, or in public, is the cross connections that can happen with hot to cold mixing, and you've got a cross connection in the building. Spring checks will help alleviate that potential. And with that 1070 mixing valve, you've now limited the hot water coming out of the faucet at 106 degrees. So state code for public is 110. 106 gives you wiggle room because you can put 160 degree water into this faucet and then your cold supply, and it would be changing that to a max of 106 degrees.
Is that automatically adjusted?
The faucet automatically.
It's not like a setting you've got to.
Correct. As soon as this is installed, it is set at a max of 106 degrees. It's in this little cartridge right there. It's a little copper. You can see at the bottom. It's a paraffin wax, which is the way most thermostatic mixing valves have, is a paraffin wax. And as it expands, it's going to be closing the waterway because the heat is expanding the wax. And so it's closing off the hot side, allowing more cold water to come in. Now, if let's say your cold water was to get shut off, that wax is going to fully close and stop this faucet from running at all if there's no cold water coming to it, because you could burn somebody. So we've seen a popularity with thermostatic mixing valves being installed in homes with small children, especially with our older hot water heaters. We're trying to run them higher temperatures.
I'm more used to the ones where you've got settings.
And that is a correct. That's a high temperature limit stop. And so let's say your high temperature goes from 140 to 160. Correct. So when I'm installing this again, I've got two indentations for my cartridge. Now I'll just tighten that back up to put my handle back on. And now talking about my final faucet. This is again more for your public restrooms. If you're have any sort of businesses with public restrooms, is the popularity of sensor faucets, because no one wants to touch anything anymore with the spread of germs and diseases, all that fun stuff.
At Target and Starbucks.
Correct. Yeah, and many of them have in the public have switched over to. Now the only problem is a lot of times when your sensor's down here, when it's down at the base of the faucet, as soon as you go in and you go below the deck, it no longer sees your hands and it shuts off. And you know, there've been like Parks and Recreation has made fun of that with trying to find which sensor works. Our sensor and our sensor is in the spout. So as soon as you come in, you've got two sensors, and it's going to sense your hands before you get to the faucet, so you're not guessing where it's at. In here, you can build this any way you'd like. There is a 1070 mixing valve. So this would come with, this is one of our EQ faucets. And so it comes with all the supplies for your faucet. When I'm installing, I would, this would be below the deck. Correct. Yeah, so you've got your two supplies. I'm going to lock them into place. And then when I'm making my other connection, I'm going to run my supply into here and lock it into place as well. Now I've fully connected. All I got to do is connect to those two water supplies. The nice thing about these faucets, so they can be battery, AC, or an SSPS, which is a self-supplying turbine, which charges the faucet with the water usage. Our solenoid is right here. That is actually what's actuating the water. Just like our metering faucets with our metering cartridges, when you press down, that's opening the water. When this gets the charge from the sensor, it's opening and closing.
There's a wire, electrical wire from here to there.
Correct. So along with that water supply, it would come into here and connect to our batteries or our pipe. And then when you're done connecting and setting your thermostat, you'd close the box, shut it with a screw, and this would function the same way as a metering. We kind of, with the outgo of metering, we've seen an increase in the use of sensor faucets. Do you have any questions? We never expect it to go bad, and we have warranties for that. And let's say you've, so in instance for us, when you scan that, you've got your part number, and as well as the serial number. If it was to go bad, we've got at least 5-year warranties on our different parts. And I haven't had a call in the 4 years these have been available, besides when someone didn't turn the water supply onto the faucet. But if these were to go bad, we have a next day shipping where we'd get a brand new box, install it on the wall, and then you'd have essentially a brand new faucet because the components are the same. The only time solenoids can be injured just the same way as a metering cartridge can when your rust gets behind. We have multiple screens in place. Before the water supply comes in the faucet, there are 2 screens on the solenoid, and that's protecting the solenoid from that rust and debris that comes from just our water. So with that, if you have any questions about different installations, I'd be happy to answer them.
Under what circumstance do you convert it from that over to a kitchen or a kitchen over to that?
Sorry?
When do you convert that from one faucet to the other faucet?
Really, well, for these, it would be based on preference. I've seen this faucet with a small spout. I believe it was in a magazine for Better Homes and Gardens. Diane Keating's home has this faucet off the wall and then with our small S6 spout, and it was just off the wall though. So that can be a kitchen, bath. It's personal preference. Our faucets are built for commercial. The longevity, they work well in homes because of that purpose, because we built them for a commercial setting. But if you wanted an undermount, you just wanted the 3 holes. These are same body, but you can get it with a sprayer. If people wanted a side sprayer with that's our 200 series. And then, you know, it's always modifying if someone wanted a pull-out sprayer, and, you know.
Maybe separate. I need to replace a tub spout. Do you know if those just screw off? I haven't even tried it yet.
The tub spouts, depending on the manufacturer, yes, they can. That would normally. Okay, yeah, so you should be able to screw that out, and there should be about 10 threads on there that would be screwing out. Yeah, and then you're gonna have an O-ring seal at the front of where the water is actually going into your tub spout at the end. You would see it at the end, yeah.